Hi, very good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us once again at our 12th Credit Suisse ASEAN conference in collaboration with the ASEAN Exchanges. Welcome to the ASEAN Tourism Panel. And we are very pleased today to have with us three distinguished panelists to share with us their views on how they are going to rebuild ASEAN tourism from here. Now, as everyone would know that ASEAN has been at the forefront of tourism development with an estimated 143 million visitor arrivals to the region in 2019. And obviously, travel and tourism has been one of the hardest hit economic sectors in 2020 as a result of COVID-19. But of course, from here on, it's a new year. And now we are looking at, at the expectations of the post-pandemic recovery for the sector, how governments, industries, and corporations are looking to adapt to the new normal to rethink and rebuild travel and tourism. Now, if I could just introduce our three panelists we have here this evening. The first is Mr. Shahril Zainal, who is the Head of Marketing Services and Government Relations at the Malaysia Healthcare Travel Council. We also have with us Mr. Dirk Cuyper, CEO of S Hotels and Resorts. And last but not least, we also have Mr. Alex Hungate, who is the President and CEO of SETS here in Singapore. So without further ado, maybe I'll kick off with a question for you, Shahril, in terms of the work that you do at the Malaysia Healthcare Travel Council. Now, Malaysia has been positioned as one of the leading healthcare destinations in the world. So can you share with us what has led to this positioning, and because of COVID-19, how has it changed the Malaysia healthcare's approach to providing healthcare services to healthcare travelers today?
Thank you, Louis. Firstly, before that, thank you for the organizer for inviting MHTC, Malaysia Healthcare Travel Council, for this webinar. To answer your questions, Louis, MHTC or Malaysia Healthcare Travel Council currently is focusing on preserving or building trust and confidence to the existing patients and as well as the potentials. So we have progressed. Malaysia as a whole, or Malaysia Healthcare, has progressed very well previous years, making it to the #1 destination for medical travel by volume in 2018, based on the global market research done by Liang Bazong, experts in healthcare travel intelligence based in the UK. So, and in 2019, basically, we have been receiving quite significant numbers of volume as well, approximately about 1.3 million arrivals. It's signifying trust in our healthcare services, of course. And last year, 2020, you see, we win big at the International Medical Travel Journal Award, IMTJ 2020, by winning Destination of the Year. This marked actually fourth times that Malaysia has claimed the title, having previously won in thrice in a row in 2015 to 2017. So we basically aspire to maintain that position post COVID-19 through our campaign, Malaysia, the World's Healthcare Marvel. Basically to maintain Malaysia as top of mind destination for healthcare travelers within the region and of course globally once the border is open. So we hope that by having all these credentials and of course all these performance achievements and all that, it will create a more credibility towards Malaysia healthcare and of course Malaysia as the destination for healthcare travel. We aspire to share our world healthcare with those who need them. That's what we plan. That is what our objective is. Even during this pandemic challenging period, we believe one thing the industry or Malaysia is believed is basically a good healthcare should be a right, not just a privilege. So that is basically what we hold on, and it is it is part of our humanitarian effort to still be there for our patients during this challenging period, as most of them have sought, their medical treatment here in Malaysia from generations to generations, and have familiarized with our medical services, and have trust towards our medical professionals. So as we slowly, rebuilding the economy, last year, we see as an opportunity to jumpstart the economy, especially when most of the industry are affected during this pandemic. Hence, in July 1st last year, 2020 to be exact, we have established a medical tourism bubble. We are the first in the region to establish clear guidelines on healthcare travel entry during this pandemic, or during this so-called lockdown or challenging period, because most of our borders are closed, right? So we have already opened a bubble for medical travel since last year, July, and we have been receiving quite a number, but not too huge, not too big, but quite a significant. Of course, mainly for critical treatment. That shows, we want to look after our existing patients at this point of time. So, and of course, to sustain the medical travel industry of Malaysia, our top priority has always remained to safeguard, the nation. Even though we are open for the travel bubble, but still we have to follow a very stringent SOP that we have already established together with immigration, and of course has been approved by Ministry of Health and Malaysian National Security Council. It includes PRC test before entering, open and arrival, and of course they have to be isolation period, and then during the 13 days of isolation period they have to do another test before returning to their country of origins. So this has been set even last year during the challenging period, you see. As well, the way we look at it, as the healthcare travel industry continues to be impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic, Malaysia Healthcare is proactively, working on recovery plan for the industry. We are highlighting the nation's abilities, strength, all the success stories as world-class quality healthcare providers. Of course, our core element is healthcare digitalisation, which enable continuity of care for patients. Our commitment in upholding Malaysia as the world healthcare marvel that you mentioned is, never stop. While we work hand in hand with the Ministry of Health to ensure that stringent SOP are closely followed, as the safety of the public, of course, continues to be our topmost priority. We do look forward, to the day when we are able to welcome healthcare travelers at full force to seek health and wellness treatments in Malaysia. So I think the main key here is basically our significant relationship with public and private, which is our public and private partnerships, to build more patient-centric approach to ensure that we deliver the best for them, and then they will experience the best experience, not just healthcare, but of course the other elements, which is tourism, and of course the safety when they are here in Malaysia. So till then, I think we will continue to direct more concentrated effort in driving sustainable and industry growth for Malaysia to continually be recognized as the world's healthcare marvel. Yeah.
Thanks for sharing, Shahril. Especially like the line that you have about how good healthcare should be a right and not a privilege. And I'm glad to hear that Malaysia has rolled out the very first medical tourism bubble since July last year. I'm glad that it's been going well. Next, maybe I can ask Mr. Dirk on. You run a very successful business as Hotels and Resorts, has a very unique portfolio of properties in what is commonly seen as very desirable global tourism destinations, Thailand, the Maldives, amongst others. But obviously, these are also the ones which are getting hit quite badly because of the pandemic. Can you share with us perhaps how is the company repositioning its business to emerge stronger from this unprecedented crisis in the hospitality industry? And in your view, what would then set the successful hospitality players apart? Given the crisis that we're going through right now. Over to you, Dirk.
That's good. Thanks, Luis. Good question. I guess like anything else, hospitality probably, or the tourism in general, is one of the hardest hit one. And hospitality has always been quite a very conservative business throughout the years and the ages, I would say. However, what we've encountered for the last couple of months is something it's unprecedented. Nobody has ever seen it. So it's really a time a bit for the businesses to reflect a bit on what you're doing and how you've been profiling yourself as a company. So definitely for us, we're quite young players in the market as hotels and resorts, and we have been very focused on the businesses where we are. So we're very much into the leisure and the resort business. So, and that's definitely our core where we are. So we are not really into business hotels or anything like that. So we are pretty much into that space. Now, we were very focused on the leisure segment, and I believe for what we can see and the trends, and particularly in certain segments that we're operating and that we see some forms or shape of recovery, that leisure definitely seems to be one of the segments that will bounce us back the fastest. Could be just casual leisure. We just heard it a bit earlier on medical, leisure, tourism. If you can combine it and so on, probably yes. I think they are kind of the hitters, I would say, in recovery in the regions, but also probably on a global scale. And those segments will come out the fastest, most likely out of the COVID. And people want to travel. There is no doubt about it. We hear it globally, we hear it regionally, we hear it domestically. People want to get out. They want to go somewhere, they want to experience things, they want to see it. It just doesn't matter, they're blocked. So they're locked in, so it's very difficult because it is a very controlled environment. So that makes it a bit challenging. Where we can see as well that people look for experiential travel journeys. So they want to go more about space and privacy. Definitely, they are kind of the key buzzwords that we're hearing from our customers and demand that's coming up. And it's very much linked as well to hygiene managers, to hygiene measurements in place. There's also a lot of things in probably that will become the new norm, wearing gloves, etc. There is a lot of things that everybody has been applying, but definitely they are the points that is coming back. So it's I would say if you encapsulate and you summarize it, it's very much on they want to travel, they do want to go, but it's very much into a safe and a clean environment. That's definitely where they wanted to go over it. So we opened our properties, probably one of the first ones, and we followed suit like the Maldives, which Luis, you just elaborate a little bit more on it. And we could see already that it has been very proven successful, that it was a kind of a cooperation between the government sector, but also between the private sector, and everybody connected to that one. And it has been proven successful in general for the country and also for the whole destination. So for us, what we're doing as well, we are not really single market players. We are very much into geographical diversification, we call it. So we are investing and operating in different markets globally. We have presence, but I just elaborate on in Maldives, Thailand, obviously, this is our home ground. We have presence in Mauritius, we have presence in Fiji and UK. Might sound a little bit less, how would I say, resort UK. But this is an investment portfolio that we are carrying throughout in the UK. So that goes from all the way from the north to the south. That gives us quite of a good spectrum as well from an investment point of view. And obviously, the main reason why we wanted to do is to capture demand, global demand. So just to diversify a bit on the risk towards your seasonalities and so on, and just to spread out and to have an equally part. Now, COVID, obviously, that nobody expected that it would be a global thing. Obviously, it has affected our whole portfolio. However, what we see already, there is some uplifts. And just to elaborate back to the Maldives, particularly, that we see some significant uplifts, which is really positive. UK as well, it's a bit diversified in that respect. Some of them are doing well, some of other regions doing a bit less well. But it really demonstrates a bit if you are geographically, I would say, diversified, it helps you, or it will help you. Some regions will bounce back faster than other ones. But that's definitely post-COVID that we really see on that one. I guess for our business as well, we are more onto an asset-light model. So we do invest, but at the same time, we're reaching out more on the HMA platforms, we call it, hotel management agreements, whereby we are more exploring into the Asian markets and particularly ASEAN, just to stay a bit in the topic of the whole afternoon session. That's definitely the space that we are exploring more moving forward into the post-COVID. Points that we were seeing as well, as we are very much a lifestyle company, so we are not doing ultra luxury, we're not into the budget space. So we feel comfortable into the lifestyle, which is kind of the 4.5 star properties. So we're working with global partners, again, just to have more on a global reach and just to find a very diversified clientele throughout our portfolio. We see as well, we launched just our new brand side and Neighbor, which is coming out in the market in the next couple of weeks. There's a lot of digitalization going on, which probably in certain sectors it's a common word, but for hospitality, it is a new buzzword. And more. I think most companies were already heavily working on digital platforms into the hospitality industry. I guess big players, big brands, they have been investing heavily onto that space, and they saw it coming. Us, we are kind of owners, investors, and operators at the same time. We have to do it in a smart way, and particularly on the digitalization, that we are really gearing towards the cloud platforms. That gives us accessibility, fast growth, and particularly in post-COVID, it's going to be fast-moving and fast-paced, and you really have to be fit and getting into that space that you can easily adapt in post-COVID area. So I really see that is something that will come up very fast. It is continue about social distancing, privacy, wellness. Yes, I think hygiene, safety, they are kind of the buzzing words that goes around it. And definitely they are the key points that we are focusing on for our investments and our portfolios that we're carrying throughout the world, that will help us in just being ready and prepared for post-COVID. I think we've done a lot of work already, and even for the last 10 months to be prepared for that one. And we can see already that it's been paying off so far. We're operating in certain markets, that it was a swift move. And you have to be pretty fast, adaptive, but also your whole management teams and everybody working with you, and also your partners. You need to make sure that with who you work together, that your partners are aligned with your own business module. If you deploy it and you come strong out in the market, that you need to be fully prepared for it. So probably, yes, as I said, that would probably a bit summarizes what we do and where we are and where we see ourselves post-COVID, and just to give a bit of advice to the audience as well towards the hospitality sector.
Thanks for sharing, Dirk. So maybe just a quick follow-up, given your geographical exposure, how do you see the pace of recovery in leisure, perhaps within the ASEAN context, as well as within some of the different geographies that you operate in?
Yeah, well, where we see the recovery, the Maldives, I mentioned, I guess if there was a textbook case study of how you want to do quick recovery in pretty much, which is kind of an uncontrolled environment, COVID, but a collaborative partnership between government and the private sector. This was a decision by the Maldivian government to open up the borders in the middle of July, which was tough. It was not easy. It was in the midst of everything that's going on, which nobody really knew what's going on. But the government really worked closely with the private sector and listened to the private sector. What can be done? How can we facilitate? But at the same time, private sector, you have to make sure that you're fully prepared for it, just to welcome and accommodate guests coming from maybe sensitive areas, red zone areas, and so on. So that happened, and we can see the Maldives at the moment. We're having a really good spin there. So December, we were running about 70, Christmas, New Year fully booked, and we know there's still premium rates in the Maldives. So that's definitely a fantastic story and great story to share. So I guess it's possible to go through it. It is possible to do it, but it needs to be very collaborative and in joint partnership, that everybody along the lines understands the rules and the regulations, but also mitigate all potential risks that you might have and be prepared for it. So as I said, so probably the Maldives it's a really good story for us and trading in the Maldives, and particularly for our portfolio. Same for the UK. Might be a bit different. We had Brexit and we have COVID, so we have a bit of everything there going on, which is a bit of a package of everything. But again, there are properties that are doing very well. There's other regions that are doing less well. But it shows for us that it's really giving some positive inputs, and very much a bit like Maldives, but in a different context. If there is a collaboration between private sector and government, it is possible to go through it, and particularly on the hospitality sector and working together with your partners. For the rest, I mean, it's a bit where we see ourselves. Fiji, Mauritius, I mean, very exotic. There are still some travel restrictions on it. It's very much a domestic play at the moment. So we just need to wait till this probably ASEAN travel bubble opens up, particularly on the cross countries between ASEAN and Australia. Definitely we will see a very fast uplift into that respect. And same for Thailand. I mean, Thailand, everybody knows at the moment, it is a domestic play. It is open for tourists with a special tourist visa. Everybody's welcome into Thailand. But we know there are still a lot of restrictions towards quarantine, etc., just to come and stay in the country. So I guess it's just a matter of when it all opens up, and we've heard it a bit earlier from Shahril, who mentioned as well that Malaysia has done a great job in doing it, particularly on connections onto the medical sector. But I think it's very similar for us in the hospitality, even if it's clean-cut hotel businesses, that we're all just waiting for it, that it opens up, and probably the bounce back might be really fast into that respect for ASEAN countries, just to when it all ends up and the borders is getting open. So what we've done is, as I said, we didn't wait for it. We don't wait till it all opens up. We have been very proactive in the company and with the whole team, just to gear ourselves towards be ready for it. If it's domestic market, how you change your business model, which was very interesting. Our business model, and particularly our properties that we had, Thailand, was probably 95% was overseas market and 5% was domestic market. So there was a very quick shift to make it, and fast thinking, how you are changing your model from being an international operators in a domestic play to be a domestic in a domestic play. So, and it proved to be working very well out for us, particularly in those destinations that we are, like Phi and Koh Samui and Phuket, which is kind of global admired destination. But it shows to be giving us some good results in that respect for those markets. So I guess, Louis, that would give a bit of an overview of where we are and a bit what's going on in these markets and where we are.
Thank you. Thanks for the detailed elaboration. Moving on to Alex. So you run the very successful aviation business across ASEAN and various parts of APAC, but also you do have material non-aviation business as well. So in terms of sets going forward, How is SATS pivoting its business in response to the COVID-19 pandemic? And where do you think the opportunities for growth are for the company today?
Thanks, Louis. Well, as Dirk was saying, this is an unprecedented crisis. So when 80% of your revenue come from aviation services, then you get hit pretty hard. So we've had to put the company through some major changes to get through the crisis. I guess 3 different categories. One is focusing on new forms of revenue outside of aviation. Second is the costs, to make sure we're in the right shape for the size of the aviation market in the near future. And we can talk about how we expect that to change going forward. And then the last one is capabilities for the future. So in terms of revenue, we've been targeting new sources of food revenue in particular, in food segments like commissary kitchen for restaurant chains, where we've made big progress with customers like Yum China, Costa Coffee, Starbucks, Tata Starbucks, etc. Also targeting ready-to-eat food. This is a category that's been particularly popular, with working from home and some of the lockdown measures. So people want ready-to-eat food for retail. So we've been selling through into Hema in China, Aldi, and we're using our own Farm Pride brand in places like Singapore, distributing through NTUC and Cheers. That's been a big growth area for us. And then also the area of alternative proteins. There's been a lot in the press about that, but we are now starting to see real volumes in the market with demand from consumers for alternative proteins. So we're distributing Impossible Foods, Fable Foods, and Growthwell, amongst others. So that's part of the sustainable new opportunities in the food market. But overall, the results from that, already seeing some results. I think that just the start, but our non-aviation revenue has grown by 50% in the first half versus the first half from the 2019. So that's we like to see traction like that, and we want to continue to accelerate that in a way that's sustainable for the future. So we don't just want opportunistic revenue. We want to build a platform for sustainable new food growth for the long term, even after the pandemic. Now turning to costs, obviously when 80% of your revenue comes from aviation, you've got to do something to reshape that cost base. So we have been right-sizing for the slower recovery of the aviation market. In 2Q, our operating expenses reduced 46% over the year before. So it's quite a big cut. Cargo has been quite resilient, but the passenger-related revenues obviously are much, much lower. Cargo, in fact, grew quarter on quarter, second quarter up about 20% over the first quarter. So the underlying losses have really narrowed considerably. In fact, our underlying in the second quarter is now down to a very small 1.6 million loss. So I think we're in good shape with about $1 billion of cash available to us on the balance sheet. So I think you can say we come through the worst of the crisis. Obviously now we're focusing on how to build for the future. So we're building a lot of critical skill sets around digitalization. So digitalizing our operations so we can get better productivity and helping our workforce also become more agile for the future. Some of the things that Dirk and Shahril were both talking about earlier. I think overall we've been through in the last 6 to 9 months, the single biggest redeployment of people and reskilling of people that our company's ever been through. I reckon about 10,000 people are doing jobs that are different from what they've been doing pre-pandemic. So really a big dramatic change. Thanks, Louis. That's all I'll say in terms of a summary.
Thank you. Thanks, Alex. So maybe for the next couple of questions, I'll just open it up for the 3 panelists to just jump in. Thanks a lot for sharing specifics with regards to your companies and the regions they are operating in. But if we just take a step back and look at ASEAN as a whole, I think there was one question that came in that was asking why is it that there's been no concerted efforts among ASEAN members to drive a revival of travel. And actually on that note, I saw that actually in November last year, ASEAN member states have actually announced a declaration on an ASEAN travel corridor arrangement framework And of course, there's the coordinating council tasked to oversee the operationalization of this framework. Some people are calling for it to be implemented in the first quarter of this year. So in your view, what do you think needs to happen, and what more needs to be done before travel can resume in a meaningful way in ASEAN? Anyone?
Maybe I'll dive in since my mic's open, Lewis. Yeah, so you're right. There was the declaration in November. That was aimed at developing common sets of pre-departure and post-arrival health and safety measures. But in fact, as you'll notice, there are very different levels of infection rates across ASEAN. So therefore, having free travel may not be at the top of everybody's list. So I think the ASEAN countries also recognize that implementing a regional strategy is more difficult given that disparity. So you see that more likely you get these bilateral corridors that get set up between certain governments, each one with its own different terms and conditions and restrictions. So you've got the reciprocal green lanes, which are primarily for business travel. And those are going between, for example, China, Hong Kong, Japan, Korea, Brunei, Malaysia, Indonesia, Singapore, etc. And those have to have special permission for business travel. Okay, so that's why you won't be able to use those for leisure travel. Then you've got unilateral air travel passes, and those are done usually by one country to say, okay, the following countries are open and you can come in and out. And those will be only open to very low infection rate countries. So in the case of Singapore, for example, they've unilaterally admitted Australia, New Zealand, China, Vietnam, and Brunei. Those are available to leisure and to business. And so that's helpful for the leisure segment. But in general, I think for those to be more widespread, you're going to have much better control measures, right? Because they're only available to those countries that have very low infection rates. So you will see faster, cheaper, more accurate testing coming in. We're already seeing the testing improving with a better sensitivity and resolution and lower cost per test. That's going to be a big enabler. You need the development of digital health passports as well, because the tracking all this manually is difficult and also is subject to fraud. So you've already seen some announcements by IATA, for example, about their Safe Travel Pass, and that has to be integrated into the health systems in each country. So the health clinics in Malaysia, in Thailand, and Singapore, for example, are going to have to be able to digitally and hopefully on a distributed ledger basis as well to get the distributed ledger basis to get the security correct. They're going to have to be able to interconnect into those safe travel passes as well. So I think there will be probably in the short term, next quarter or 2 quarters, the needle will move only as a result of better control measures. But in the meantime, of course, as the vaccination is picking up, you're going to see an additional aid to further relaxation of travel restrictions. So that certain countries will vaccinate sooner than others, and those infection rates will come down, and therefore those countries will be more open to the risks of opening borders. I think initially the priority will be business, and then subsequently for leisure as well. So we are, as you know, SATS is also working on the movement of the vaccines through our cargo operations. So that we get a sense for, the fact that the vaccines are moving from China, from Russia, from the US, from Europe into Asia, and for redistribution into the populations. But I personally think that's going to be at least a couple of quarters before you see any meaningful impact from the vaccination measures. And in most countries with much larger populations, it will take longer time period than that.
Thanks, Alex. Shahril or Dirk, is there anything further you'd like to add?
I think Alex has given us a really good overview. Ultimately, he's closest to where it all starts in the aviation business, so he knows very well. So we are actually connected to the aviation business, and that's a bit of our lifeline wherever we operate. So once we have that one, it will help all the hospitality. So there's not much I have to add on. As probably what we heard, there's a lot of talks going on the ASEAN corridors and integrations, and open up the green lanes and the bubbles and so on. So yeah, I think it's just for us waiting as well. What we can see, and alluding a little bit more to what I mentioned earlier, is it needs to be a co-effort between governments and probably private sector to a certain extent, wherever we can help in certain places only, just to facilitate. And it's going to be a fully integrated line, I would say, rightly from that whole travel pattern, particularly on the leisure segment and so on, that it will be needs to be a kind of a semi-controlled environment whereby, yes, you will need to have your health passports carrying with you. You're going to get checked on the plane. You're going to get checked when you're off. Once you're in the hotel, there is all these sanitation and hygiene rules in place and so on. Just to reassure, and I'm just referring now just specifically in the leisure segment or the businesses that we are in, that people feel comfortable, that people feel good, that they feel safe to travel, and it's good to go out there, whatever they know, wherever they be, that not only for themselves, but also with whom they travel or wherever they stay, and the environment, that it's all kind of an endorsed environment, that it's safe and great to stay, that there is no anything kind of risk areas that you wanted to go there. So yeah, I guess that's probably just my few added words on Alex elaborate. Yeah, great overview on ASEAN and opening up.
Thanks, Dirk. Luis, may I add? Yeah, I mean, for medical tourism industry, it sits in between the pivotal components of ASEAN member states' commitment to further strengthen public health. So this is, of course, to make to the measures to contain the pandemic, of course, to protect the people. This is where the government role is crucial. We foresee, like Mr. Dick mentioned just now, and this is where we take the opportunity to develop, bilaterals or multilateral travel corridor arrangement between individual ASEAN member states, perhaps. For example, we receive quite a number of Indonesian patients, coming to Malaysia pre-COVID-19. So that's where the government, through government, has to be in line and establish, the regulations, the policies to allow, full, perhaps not full force, but partial of their citizens to allow to come to Malaysia to get treatment, for example. So this is, of course, to ensure that we provide still, the best healthcare services for all people within the region, not just the individual countries and all that. So, exceptional on governmental policy making level, safety measures, regulations, especially for the health travelers. I think that one, ASEAN platform can facilitate or to expedite, perhaps, the policymakers, their regulations and all that, so that we can save or sustain the travel industry as a whole. And of course, in my context, would be the medical tourism sector specifically.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone, for your kind sharing. Maybe we can just turn our attention to, so we talked about the near-term recovery prospects as well as some of the requirements. I for one see the IATA Safe Travel Pass as no different from a passport going forward. You just need to have it before you can even travel. And at least there's some form of an international kind of benchmarking here, especially if it's based on the distributed ledger technology. But I think beyond the near term, if you just think a couple of steps further, how do you think travel and tourism in ASEAN is likely to evolve in the post-COVID era? And what do you think would be the key differences compared to, what was business as usual, what was the pre-COVID era, so to speak?
Maybe I'll kick off then. Thanks, Lewis. Well, I think Asia Pacific is expected to be the region at the forefront of the recovery, because I think the level of control of the outbreak in Asia has been relatively good compared to other parts of the world. The recovery in Asia obviously will be led by China, which is outside of ASEAN, but which has a big impact on ASEAN. In fact, the amount of air travel in China domestically has already recovered to pre-crisis levels, which is kind of astounding when you look at the rest of the world. The airlines there, the big state-owned airlines, have lowered their fares to stimulate that demand, but it shows you what can be done when you have a very large domestic economy. Domestic will lead the recovery in ASEAN as well. Large countries with large populations like Indonesia, Malaysia, etc., they can lead that. But even small populations like Singapore, in a small way, as you know, we run the cruise center in Singapore as well, and it's actually running regular cruises. So Genting's World Dream is sailing 3 times a week, and the Royal Caribbean's Quantum of the Seas is sailing 2 times per week from Marina Bay Cruise Center. All based on very effective rapid testing for everybody before they embark and when they disembark as well. So good safety management will be key to stimulating the domestic demand. If you look at the infection levels, obviously East Asia has done relatively well. So the chance to open up to East Asia for ASEAN is one which I think we should try to find measures to facilitate. Dirk mentioned earlier that when we get access to Australia and New Zealand tourists, also that will be very helpful. Although their infection rates are very low, especially in New Zealand, but they seem to be reticent about opening up, so hard to predict when that would happen. I think for aviation specifically, my prediction is that business volumes will grow before tourism, simply because although Dirk and Shahril are right, people do want to travel, there is pent-up demand. There are so many restrictions in place in Asia, where control over the outbreak has been the priority for most governments. That it is literally impossible for people to travel as tourists. They are not allowed to, and so I think that in the short term, at least for most of ASEAN, it will be business travel because it's approved on a person-by-person basis. Business travel normally for aviation represents 20% of total volume, and leisure travel is the other 80%. But business travel is disproportionately important because the yields are higher, as I think everybody understands. So a business travel on a lane-by-lane basis is probably the outlook that will drive the volumes. Vaccination obviously is going to be key. We mentioned that earlier, and when you look on a longer-term horizon, it's definitely the most optimistic factor that we can look to. Vulnerable members of the population will be vaccinated first, but I think those that have essential business travel will also tend to be front of the queue as well. So we should see that also emphasizing the thesis that business travel will tend to take the lead. But overall, once vaccination reduces population infection rates to an acceptable level, then you will start to see the vision of the ASEAN agreement coming in place, where you've got open and free travel again. My expectation for that is going to be more into 2023 and 2024, 2024 was the IATA forecast for a return to normality, as probably most people on the call know. The vaccine obviously has created a silver lining to that and probably brought it forward. But I can't see, given the volume of people that need to be vaccinated, I can't see a return to normality much before that. I think 2023 probably best case. Thanks.
Okay. Sorry, Luis, I was on mute a bit earlier on. Yeah, thanks, Alex, for taking it on. But yeah, just to add on following the aviation industry, where we just heard, just on the hospitality and hotels is where we see post-COVID, definitely there is a change in digitalization of the travel logistics. So normally travel agents and so on, the conventional way of how it was changed rapidly. I think particularly Asia was already, and ASEAN countries was already far more developed towards digitalization, but it just accelerated a bit faster. So Europe and the rest of the world is following and taking on suit, but we can see that clearly. So apps, mobiles, and so on. So people want to be immediately connected with hotels and bookings and get all the information. So that's definitely a game changer. And it's fast moving on it, so that they find you in that whole space. We see as well that travel plans so far in the post-recovery, for what we can see and what we can see and what I've heard as well from colleagues and talking to them, it's far more shorter booking windows. So in the past it was a couple of weeks, couple of months out. So people tend to now doing short-term bookings, even long-haul flights, which is significant for planning and so on. But they just wanted to wait and see a bit how it goes and what the impact and how is the easiest and the fastest way to go there. But definitely that has changed. So that for businesses like us, that just puts a little bit more pressure sometimes and towards your business outlook and your forecasting, that it's a bit more challenging and a bit more unpredictable to see how it's going to look like in the next couple of months. But however, there is a bit of what we just heard on the positive outlook is silver lining. So it's just an adaptation on the way things are moving forward and be ready for it and understanding if it's short-term patterns of booking windows and so on, that you need to be ready and to be fully geared up to that one. So a lot has to do for our industry on the terms of cancellation policies. That's what they're asking for, obviously. If you have to change your travel plans, that it cannot be stringent as it was before. So you need to flex yourself a lot more. I think it's very similar in the airline businesses, which probably in other industries as well, and prepayment arrangements. So they are definitely kind of key tools or key points that have been asked into that in the space of hospitality and moving post-COVID. Brand standards, yes. Safety, hygiene. I mean, we can repeat it 100 times and we heard it all over and all over again. But yes, I mean, this is kind of the norm of life, and this is part that we have to live with it. Yeah, what Alex was saying as well, business travel versus leisure. Again, just bring on the Maldives in this part of the world that we saw. Probably it's against all odds. That you would think you have to get there by plane, it's long distance, it's not easy to get there and so on, that it's doing very well. So in that respect, that there is a bit of silver lining out there that just demonstrate that travel will come back in one form or a shape, that people want to commute and meet either for businesses or for leisure and just to relax and take some good times out there. So I guess that's probably where kind of key points that we can see in the post-COVID area, that from a consumer point of view, what we can see and what they're expecting from us, and what we can see as well, kind of initial trends and how you need to be prepared for it.
Sure. Thanks, Dirk. I'm also conscious of time. So Shahril, maybe as you respond to the question, maybe you'd like to also share some closing remarks as well.
Yeah, sure. I think Alex and Dave already mentioned about the vaccination and all that, but I guess looking at the scenario now, especially when we are faced with the pandemic and all industry players need to be innovative in order to sustain the industry further, fostering stronger collaboration between industries and stakeholders, I think is crucial. To achieve, excellence within this sector, within this industry. And of course, from a medical tourism point of view, it's to help regenerate the healthcare travel industry. With the pandemic still posing threats to face-to-face encounters, initiatives such as telemedicine, teleconsultations, e-pharmacies will begin to take place in the future healthcare system. We foresee that. And of course, Malaysia Healthcare Travel Council, given that we are a government agency under Ministry of Health, Malaysia, playing a very significant role in bridging both public and private sector for better industry outcomes. This has been mentioned by both Alex and Dirk on how both private and public can work closely to amplify, the industry further and to sustain. That's the most crucial part, to sustain all the players and all the stakeholders for us to still maintain in this industry. Yeah.
So I think we just about come to the end of the session now, but Alex and Dirk, is there any final closing remarks you'd like to share with the audience here?
Dirk, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I guess how tough and how challenging it is and everything that we're going for it. It's just a matter of, COVID time, it is what it is. Probably you have to live with it in all businesses and put our hands together and trying to get through it. So it has to start from somewhere. And as I said, it's a collaborative effort from everybody involved. And I'm sure we all will get through it. If it's not in the next 2 months, 3 months, quarter 2, quarter 3, depends a bit how fast things are going up, but we've heard it. I'm pretty positive. There is silver lining. There's massive from COVID that is happening in Europe towards medication and so on. So I think that's all positive news, and we have to be strong and to go through it. And I guess like anything else, probably it's survival of the fittest most likely in the next couple of weeks, and keep the cash tight and work towards the future, I would say.
And I would just point out that travel and tourism accounts for about 10% of world GDP, so 330 million jobs. So it's a major issue for governments as well as for society. So I think there has to be a focus on making sure our people are skilled, multi-skilled, can support the company's diversification, which will be necessary. Because this won't be the last, probably not the last pandemic and not the last crisis either that the industry will go through. And that social focus has to be coupled with an environmental focus as well, because even pre-COVID, there's a lot of focus on too much travel, too much tourism in a way that's not sustainable. And I think all of us in the industry have to think about how to make travel sustainable in terms of carbon, in terms of protecting the beauty spots that people are traveling to. And this is a good opportunity for us to take that step back and to think about how to do that, so that as we rebound in a more sustainable way for our people and for our environment and for the societies that we're visiting as well.
Got it. Thanks, Alex. And with that, we've come to the end of today's panel session on the ASEAN tourism sector. Thank you very much to Alex, Dirk, and Shahril for a generous sharing. And I think, you're right. It's really all about sustainability. And I'm sure with the efforts of governments, corporate leaders like yourselves and individuals, I'm sure we'll see the light of the tunnel really soon. So with that, thank you very much, panelists. And thank you very much to the investors for joining us this evening. You will now disconnect. Thank you.